Today, we are going to learn about the slave trade and how it affects us today. So Trisha, tell us how the African slave trade began.
African slave trade emerged in the New World after Europeans brought over diseases and wiped out the native population. The Europeans were used to highly populated areas and had been exposed to different diseases while the natives lived very differently. Due to this population decrease, because the Europeans had used natives using the encomienda system, Europeans had to look elsewhere to find new labor and turn to Africa.
Why did Europeans want to take slaves from Africa, and why were they successful?
Enslaved Africans for three major reasons. One, they were immune to the diseases that wiped out the native population. Two, there was nobody to resist or try and help them escape. And three, they were a permanent source of cheap labor.
Emily, can you tell us more about the civil rights movement in relation to racism and slavery?
Over time, Europeans began to connotate darker skin color with inferiority. Slavery, which was developed to provide a labor force, eventually led to the racist ideals that plagued our country. In response, the civil rights movement occurred. The civil rights movement was a fight for social justice that took place during the 1950s and 60s for Black Americans to gain equal rights. In response to Black Americans gaining new rights such as the right to vote or the illegalization of slavery, the Grandfather Clause created a loophole around voting rights and claimed that you could only vote if your ancestors did. Jim Crow laws were loopholes around segregation and created a terrible hierarchy and marginalization. Boycotts, protests, and sit-ins began to occur to combat the discrimination.
So how does all of that connect to racism in our world today?
Thanks for asking. It's actually all intertwined together. The term race evolved alongside the development of America, which had its foundation built on slavery and still affects us to this very day. In June of 2020, the Black Lives Matter movement began following the death of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. The movement addresses the unequal treatment and oppression that stems from the era of slavery, because while it might have been abolished, the primary ideals such as inequality and maltreatment continue today.
All right, well, there you have it. Events occurring in the 1400s really do still have an impact on our everyday lives today. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope you learned something today.